Good morning, Oak Life. What is up, familia? It is good to see all of these beautiful faces. Can't see all of the faces in the chat on the YouTube, on the Facebook, but it is good to know that you are with us. So thanks for rocking with us. Thank you for worshiping with us. If you are new to Oak Life, we're just a community of everyday folks. We started a church, an effort to learn, love, fight, and follow as best as we can with the example of Jesus. And this morning is no exception. So we are going to get started. I'm going to pray us in, and we're going to have a time of worship through song. So if you would join me in prayer. God of love, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the time in which we get to share. Even through this technological practice that we have, Lord, you are still with us. You are still here. And we are very thankful for that. Lord, be with us, speak to us, and allow us to connect with your presence this morning. Amen.
I will trust in you and know that you are with me forever. I'll confide in you, 'cause you're the only answer that matters. Even in the you will be my light. Even when I'm hopeless, you will be my guide. I will not be shaken, I will not be moved. Even in the chaos, I know that you're good. You're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together. Trust in you, your thoughts and plans for me, they are good. I will wait on you. I know that you will see me through. Even in the darkness, you will be my light. Even when I'm hopeless, you will be my God. I will not be shaken, I will not be moved. Even in the chaos, I know that you're good. You're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together.
Amen. Yes, and amen. Andrew coming through from SoCal, holding us down. Fun fact, both Andrew and myself got sent that song this week from different random people. That song is dope. So
That was really beautiful.
Yeah, very beautiful. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Morning, Diane. What's up, Maeva?
Got some action in the comments. Good stuff. Well, thank you. Continue to engage through the comments on YouTube or Facebook. That is how we stay together. That is how God holds us together in this time. So yes. That said, we got some announcements coming your way. But first, before we get into the announcements, there's a little bit of something we want to do. Chris, what are we doing?
Humans of Oak Life. I like you built that anticipation there, Greg. So if you are just joining us, I think one of the things we've been trying to do as best we can is stay connected and stay a part of each other's stories and get to know one another and all that. And especially as we are continuing to shelter in place. So each week we've been highlighting a different person from within our community in a segment we've called Humans of Oak Life. And we just ask them to introduce themselves, tell us what's been a high and a low or a rose and a thorn in this whole season. And then as you all ask questions, follow-up questions in the comments, we'll continue to ask them questions too. So would you give a drum roll, a welcome round of applause, however we want to do it online, for our dear friend, Beth.
Hello.
Morning. Hello.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. And thanks for being a part of this and being our Human of Oak Life for today. So the first question is just kind of an introduction. Would you mind telling us who you are and a little bit about yourself, anything you feel like sharing?
Sure. Yes. Well, I'm very happy to be with you this morning. I've been a part of the Oak Life community since around 2017, maybe a little bit before that. So that's sort of amazing for me to think about. Let's see, I live in Oakland with my amazing partner, Darren, and our precious orange kitty, Moritz. And I super duper love them both. And I've been trying really hard to think about answering this question without tying my identity to whatever job I happen to have in the moment. Maybe that'll change if I land my dream job someday. But yeah, let's see. So I love taking in art in all its different forms: music, performance, theater, fine art, design, film, television, really good writing and poetry. That's something about me that it just gives me life. That's something that refuels me. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks. And I remember you've hosted some Oak Life Oscar parties in that vein. And so I see that true.
Absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to hosting a huge one probably next year to make up for not having one this year.
That's awesome. Well, you're getting some hellos in the comments, Alma and Anth, Maeva. And so feel free to ask a follow-up question, maybe about a favorite movie or form of art or anything like that. And that'll be a chance for us to get to know Beth a little bit more. Oh, here's some, Larry and Leslie mentioned the parties. Okay, so the next question is, in this whole season, we used to call it 2020. Now it's kind of an open-ended season of what we're all in.
Yeah.
We've been using this framework of a rose and a thorn. Like there's been things that have been good, some things that have been life-giving, also some challenges. What has been a challenge and maybe something life-giving for you in this season?
Yeah, it's a really good, important question to ask. I'll start with my thorn. I I've had this really strange experience that I've actually found out is not just me. It's sort of been a collective feeling that many people have had during this season, where I've had this really strange sort of brain fog, and it's made it really hard for me to focus on anything or to feel motivated to do anything productive. Which is a really bizarre thing for me. That's not something I normally struggled with before this season. So it's like a very new experience for me to try to navigate. And it's also confusing because it's like I'm home all the time. I should have all this time to get things done that I've been wanting to do and to organize my storage area and things like that. And my brain, I just can't seem to get myself there. So that's been really, really super challenging for me. But it's comforting. It's comforting in a way for me to know that I'm not alone in that, and that many people have been experiencing those feelings. So like often all I can bring myself to do is just play silly games on my phone and just like stare at a screen. And like, that's all that I have in me. So that's kind of where I've been.
You definitely got some folks who can relate, myself included. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you everyone for chiming in about that. Like, it really helps me to know that I'm not the only one. So that's kind of, yeah, that's been a collective experience a lot of us have had. That's definitely been a thorn for me. I would say the rose that I've experienced is I've had these, in the midst of the fog, I've had these really surprising bursts of creativity, where I'm suddenly like, I have to make something. I have to make something and do something really good with my time and put something good into the world. And so my partner and I made a quarantine music video last spring. At Christmas time, my sister and I, even though she lives on the East Coast, we made a Christmas music video together as a gift for our family. And I helped coordinate the Grinch scene that we filmed for the Oak Life Christmas movie. So there have just been these sudden bursts of collaborative, creative projects that have really given me life throughout this season. And I don't know where they came from, but it's been really fun to see those emerge.
Totally, and it's been fun to watch those things emerge. The Grinch was awesome. Yeah, more people just relating to what you're saying. Thanking you for sharing. Okay, if anybody has a question, feel free to ask. We'll have a couple more moments here. Greg asked, as an artistic person, do you find more value in creative expression with others or by yourself?
I love that question. I have actually found a bit more value in collaborative creative projects, engaging in it with others in community. And that's also made it a little bit difficult for me as an artist. I think a lot of forms of art are very individually done. Like one person will sit and write something or paint a painting, and it's not really something that calls for collaboration to make it. So I think being here during this time in my home, mostly by myself, that's made it difficult for me to be creative, because I don't feel as motivated to do creative things if I don't have a community doing it together.
Totally. Yep. I relate to that. That makes sense. Some people highlighting the Grinch. Okay. There was one question. Will you share the music video? Somebody else wants to see it too.
I would love to share music videos with people. I have to keep them semi-private because of copyright laws, but I can send people the links. Absolutely. And I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Okay. And there's one last question. It's from Rachel. What do you want to take from this weird season into the future?
Ooh, what do I want to take from this weird season? That's a really good question. It's it's hard to think if I would want to take anything from it in a way. It's just been such a difficult time for a lot of people. I think something valuable that came out of it is, while I have struggled with this brain fog and these daily moments where I'm like, all I can do is play this game on my phone right now. That is all I have energy to do. I would feel really guilty about that. And I actually had a phone session with my therapist, and she really encouraged me to give myself permission and to just acknowledge, like, that's what I need right now, or that's all I'm able to do, and that's okay. And so that helped tremendously. And I just felt much better not having that burden of guilt along with everything. So I think I want to take that with me, is just paying attention to what I need and, not feeling guilty about it and giving myself permission.
That's awesome. I think that's something we can all, a lesson we all need. Well, thank you, Beth. Thanks for being our human. Thanks for everyone who asked questions. Thanks for being on this journey with us together. And we will look forward to a massive Oscar party at some point. Thanks again, Beth. With that, I'm going to invite up Leslie, who's going to be leading us in announcements this morning. So welcome, Leslie.
Has said hello, and it's now time for a new dawn, a new day, and a new way to get connected. The puppy would also like to say hello. Say hello, puppy. Yes. Great. So with that, please add any community announcements in the chat so that I can make sure we highlight them on the screen. Also, make sure to get your communion elements ready. As a nod to Reed, I brought a cookie today. It is one of those allergy-free cookies that are super delicious. So that's going to be my communion element. Hopefully you guys all have time to get yours. Also, don't forget that Oak Life has an emergency benevolence fund. This emergency benevolence fund allows you to make requests for any needs that you may be incurring. We all know that it's a rough time for everyone, and we want you to know that we're here to help. And if you have a little bit extra and you feel willing to donate, you can also donate at oaklifechurch.com/generosity. And it's a great time, like Beth said, going to therapy, having time with just to really focus on your mental health, focus on your headspace, really looking into our mental health resources, which is oaklifechurch.com/mental health. There's also a book group. Who doesn't like to read? I do. I like to read. Not that I don't like to read. I do like to read. So join the book group. It's already started. It's Learning to Walk in the Dark, which follows along with our series. You can check the email for more information. There is a Facebook discussion group, as well as there'll be a closing go-to meeting for everyone to join to talk about the book. Today, after church, we're having our discernment meeting. Once a quarter, Oak Life leadership presents a little bit about what we're doing, how the last quarter has gone, how the year has gone, and answers questions from the community, just so you kind of get an understanding of where we're going. So if you'd like to join the discernment meeting today at 11:30, please email leadership@oaklifechurch.com for the link. We're going to talk today about the Freedom Story. This is going to be our third Sunday generosity partner. And we have Rachel here to talk to us a little bit more about what the Freedom Story does, specifically what they're doing in times of COVID. But you don't need to hear from me because there's a video. Cue that video. Well, thank you so much for that intro, Rachel. We'd love to hear a little bit more about the Freedom Story, what you're doing, and how you got started.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Leslie. So I co-founded the Freedom Story 12 years ago with a Thai friend of mine. And the really kind of the drive and the heart behind it was to focus on prevention. And I think a lot of times when we hear about human trafficking, we think about rescue or aftercare, and all of our focus is on prevention. And so education, poverty alleviation, access to resources, human rights training. We work a lot with refugees and migrants, and focus on, securing citizenship, things like that. And so during COVID, it's been very interesting because we've kind of pivoted from a prevention organization to a relief organization in a lot of ways, temporarily. And then, of course, you add on things like the QAnon conspiracy theories, and kind of really going back to the basics of starting to re-educate supporters, followers about what is trafficking, what is actually happening, and starting to dispel some of those myths and rumors. And so it's been an interesting season for us, to say the least.
Yeah, you're doing incredible work. We've heard a lot. If you've been with Oak Life for a while, we hear a lot about the Freedom Story. And I just thank you for allowing us to be one of your partners. If there's one thing you'd want us to know about the Freedom Story and why it's important to donate, what would it be?
That's a great question. Right now, I would say that, COVID is making vulnerable people that much more vulnerable. And that is true for every country, every city, every population. And so I think that our efforts during these times have really been to make sure that basic needs are met. And so whatever is raised today will go directly to that. And so that's things like, handing out masks, creating awareness about what is COVID and how do you take care of yourself, handing out food baskets, et cetera, et cetera. And so just making sure that really basic needs are met, because that helps to prevent people from then ending up in really desperate situations.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's amazing. And, it's easy to focus so much about just what's going on in our own life, but it's like we have to have a world view about it as well. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention. And if anyone has any questions for Rachel or any more about the Freedom Story, please feel free to put it in the chat because she's chatting along with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie.
All right. So as you know, we continue to have announcements every week. We send them out in a weekly newsletter and we post them on Facebook, on Instagram. We share them in our Roots and Branches. But for you to get connected and to be linked to all these things, make sure you're signing up for the weekly newsletter. So you can email Chris@oaklifechurch.com, or you can sign up through oaklifechurch.com. At the bottom, you can sign up and put your email address in there. Make sure to check your spam if it's the first time, just in case it goes there. Thank you so much.
Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone who's been part of the service so far. So grateful to have this community in times like this. And my name's Chris, if I haven't met you yet. And if you are joining us on YouTube or Facebook, yeah, please feel free to drop a line in the chat and make this engaging, and we can stay connected even though we are online. Before I start, just want to say special thanks to the panel last week, all those who shared, and to Greg for speaking the week before, and all those who are leaning into community, especially in like the world we live in. And if you are new, we are talking through this theme called Walking in the Dark, which is kind of the theme we chose that feels like something we want to wrestle with together, that this time we're in is kind of dark, and that sometimes we associate darkness with like bad, but maybe there's something here that God is doing, and we can learn to wrestle with God in this time and learn to be transformed by it. But I will say that this week and the moment we're in continues to feel like an uncertain time. And I want to let you know, wherever you're at, whatever you're carrying, whatever you're stressed or not stressed about, it's okay. And we can be together in that. And God holds us all. And so this week, like so many weeks over the last 12 months, felt like a week where I was like, okay, I'm scheduled to speak. I have no idea what to say. And so I reached out to our speaking team over Marco Polo and opened up this conversation about, hey, given all that's happened in the Capitol and this moment politically we're in, and even communally still with COVID ravaging our nation still in our world, what needs to be said? And so a lot came out of that, a lot. And I'm going to spend a good chunk of the sermon just kind of repeating back what the folks on our speaking team said. So before I do that, though, I want to start with a passage of scripture. This passage might sound like unrelated to what's going on, but I'm hoping it'll speak to us today, and I'll tie it in as best I can. I'm hoping it'll connect to where we're at. This passage is one you've likely heard before, often in spaces that are more fluffy or sentimental, like weddings. But this morning, I would love for us to read it and hear it in a way that is more of a call to action, that is spoken in a time of urgency, in a moment like ours. So the passage is 1 Corinthians 13. This is Paul writing to a church in Corinth, which is modern day Greece. We read, if I speak in the tongues of mortals, before I say this, before I read it, please, if there's a word or a phrase or a feeling or an impression that is speaking to you out of this passage that just stands out, I would love it if you drop a line in the chats, and I'll have a moment at the end where I might be able to highlight some ways this text is speaking to us as a community. So 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. You can go to the next slide. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part and prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now, we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, the greatest of these is love. I think the next slide is the text in the entirety. Just want to take a moment to let this passage breathe. 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 13. If there's a word or a phrase that is speaking to you, feel free to drop it in the comments and we can highlight it. I see one here, Maria, saying that the beginning of this passage is my fave. Proof of your love. There's so much in this passage. I want to give it just one more moment. If anybody has a comment or a phrase they'd like to share. There's a little bit of a delay here between YouTube and what we see on StreamYard. Cool. Well, feel free to continue to drop words or phrases from this passage, 1 Corinthians 13. We're going to come back to it a little bit later. So what does this have to do with the moment we're in? Why did I bring up this passage? Well, like I said, I'll come back to this. I mentioned earlier that they asked our speaking team to share how this moment was for them and even what our community needs to hear and maybe even where God is in this moment. And there was so much stuff. And so instead of trying to like tie it all together or like package it perfectly, I thought I'd just relay it all because I think it reflects where so many of us are, that there's just a ton going on and there's so many different themes and ideas that we're wrestling with. So here are some comments and reflections from our speaking team, which is a group of folks at Oak Life who helped inform these messages, who are helping speak, and so forth. So they said in this moment that there was a reflection and a need to renounce violent Christian extremism and a frustration that there seems to be no accountability. Some were talking about how there's a struggle of how to dialogue with friends or family who seem trapped in alternative reality bubbles. There was a sense of awareness that in this moment, specifically in regards to what happened in our capital last week, that many in our community, specifically our Black siblings, have been feeling these feelings for a long time. It's not new. There was a sense that playing with these themes of light and dark, that light might be the chance to see people's perspective, see other people's perspectives, and darkness might be what it means to be in your own bubble. There was a lot of concern right now around the definition and power of words, that words have consequences for our world, that words have led to what happened on the 6th, a failed and deadly insurrection. It was not a peaceful protest. The words like sedition and treason or terrorism felt like strong words for what happened. There was some conversation around the fact that language itself is privileged. Like who gets to define these words and use these words? And that often those in power have a different relationship with words than those on the margins. There were numerous comments, maybe you can relate to this in this moment, around feeling fatigue and sadness and anger and an anxiety that things are just going to be this way for a while. Is that what's going to happen? There was a lot of tension around what it means to be church in this moment, that the church both needs to be a place of safety and sanctuary, even like a part of people's self-care patterns, but it also needs to be a place where we can have hard conversations and call out injustice. Somebody made the joke that, hey, at some point, Chris, we're giving you all this information. You're going to have an answer for us on Sunday, right? By the way, I will. Just kidding. There were comments made by our speaking team that truth needs to be said, that misinformation needs to be called out, that many words in our collective vernacular have been co-opted. Words like patriot or allegiance, or even theological concepts like the city on the hill have been used by those in power to magnify people's racist tendencies or to gain power and hold power. There were a lot of questions around what it means to be Christians in this moment, to stand up for justice in the midst of this dark moment we're in. One person on our team who happens to be Black brought up the history of the Capitol building itself, how the building was built by slaves, carpenters and builders who did not have freedom, and how tragically and horrifically ironic it is that a group of largely white folks felt ownership of this building while those in the margins often don't. There were comments and references to books. James Baldwin was brought up. There are questions of how the church teaches and holds power. What does it mean for a church to have power? There was anger and grief that so much work had been done, but it feels like there's so much still to be done. There were comments that we must confront our history, that the church must own up to its complicity with white supremacy, not just in the past, but now. That churches, even in the civil rights movement, have been places where things like Confederate flags were sewed during the civil rights movement as direct opposition to movements of justice for all. There was a lot of frustration around toxic theology among politicians that has fueled a lot of what we're seeing, including conspiracy theories like QAnon and others. That the dogma of American exceptionalism that's at the root of so much of this cultural moment needs to be challenged, because yes, there's beauty in America, but we are not perfect. Some of the members in the team were saying that, like, hey, this isn't surprising at all. Like, we knew this was coming. We shouldn't have been surprised. There was ultimately underneath it all, just a few last closing comments to relay back. There was a sense that we need to rally together, that we need spaces like Oak Life more than ever. There were questions around where God is. Some said God is with us still. Others said God is not with that mob. And then somebody else said, well, God is with them, just not their values. And there was the tension of grace that was brought up. Ultimately, underneath it all, there was this, in this kind of nonlinear hodgepodge of comments, there was this hope that God is still with us. So I say all that. That's kind of to close out this section, to say that's, I think, the best I can say in this moment. All of that is real. All of that's what we're experiencing. All of that's what we're questioning. And so I can't solve it all. I think a sermon in this moment needs to have some tension and some lack of full resolution, because things aren't resolved. And that's part of the conversation we're in, of walking in the dark. That things right now, we can't see fully what's going to happen next, and things are unfamiliar and uncomfortable. So how do we find God with us? How do we continue to be a community that reflects Jesus to each other and to our world? So that brings me back to that passage, 1 Corinthians. Why did I bring up 1 Corinthians 13? Which again, might feel like an unrelated passage. It might feel like the wedding passage. Well, I think that the context that Paul was writing actually was a context where there's a lot of darkness, right? In the church in the first century, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's persecution, there's all sorts of things going on. And in verse 12, Paul uses this phrase. I don't have it on the screen, but I just want to highlight it again. Talking about how we need to walk the path of love. And he says, for now, or because now, we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Now we only see in part, but then we will know fully. The context in which Paul is imploring the Corinthian church to deepen their commitment to love is a context of through a mirror dimly. Right now, things are unclear. Things are dark. Things are uncertain. The word there in Greek is not the word dimly, actually. It's the word enigma. The most wooden phrase or translation of this phrase would have been, right now we see through a mirror enigma. If you know, that word is carried on to English, and it means a riddle or a very complex moment or complex situation. So right now we see through a mirror riddle, but then one day we'll see clearly. Right now things are dark. Right now we don't know exactly how things are going to work out, but one day we will. And until that moment, what do we do? And this whole chapter that Paul is writing is not just sentimental and fluffy, but I think it's a call to action. Right now, things are blurry and complicated. Yeah, there's all this tension around what the church is supposed to do. There's frustration and anger about what's going to happen this week. There's so many questions, so much fear even. What do we do in moments like that when we are seeing through a mirror dimly, when there's moments of darkness? I think this is the constant refrain of Jesus and his people, to continue to walk the path of love even when things are dark, especially when things are dark. But there are dangers in the dark. The answer isn't just, hey, keep loving people, because the dark has real dangers around the corner. The other day I was on a jog right after sunset. And I thought I had enough time to like make it back there and back. It was an out and back jog before it got too dark, but I went into kind of a treed area. And so like any ambient light was blocked. And as I'm jogging, I swear up on the hill, I saw what looked like either a bobcat or a mountain lion. I was kind of on the periphery or like on the border of the city. And it freaked me out, right? It's dark and I see something that I don't know what it is. And the whole rest of the jog, I start to see like things everywhere. And I'm like on edge and looking for clarity, right? It's dark and uncertain. So much so that like even behind me, I kept almost hearing, right? I was like, oh, there's footsteps behind me. Like something's there. And I bring the story up because I think in moments like what we're in, there is a temptation to let our kind of fight and flight instincts take over with how we see each other and how we see the world. There are real dangers in the dark, but if we're not careful, if we don't wrestle with them, if we don't process through them, we'll start to see everything as a danger. We'll start to see the world through the binary of good person, bad person. We'll look for oversimplified answers. And so in these moments of darkness, I think there's lots of ways we can respond, but I think maybe there's 3 I want to highlight today in moments like what we're in. The first is a path towards self-protection. In this path, we look for ways to control the situation. We look for ways to maintain our own safety. And that's not a bad thing. But ultimately, if we continue down that path, protecting ourselves will come at the expense of others, which feels pretty incongruent to 1 Corinthians. Additionally, we'll start looking for simple answers. We'll look for anything that can give us control. And I think the tendency towards self-protection, if we're not careful, can bring us down the path of things like conspiracy theories, simple answers, and leaders who can solve it all for us. When we're only looking to our own self-interest, to our own self-control and self-protection, there are dangers in that path. We should take care of ourselves. We should have self-care. We should have boundaries. But if that's all we're seeing, the way that plays out collectively is you get leaders who manipulate that. You start to believe simple answers to very complex situations, which is what conspiracy theories do. You start to see the world through, we're on the good side, and they're on the bad side. We're the good country, they're the bad country. They're the bad party. There's one path, self-protection. There are some dangers there. The other path is just to sleep through it. Maybe you've had this temptation in the season, like, oh, this will all be over soon. Let me just like bury my head in the sand and wait for it to blow by. And I got to be honest, this approach works. Taking the approach of just trying to wait for this thing to be over and sleep through it, it works. If you can do that, right? Inherently, the choice of maybe calling this like the apathetic path or the inactive path is a path that is inherently one of those who are privileged. The only people who can really say, you know what, there's craziness, there's a chaotic world out there. I'm just going to let it go by, and I don't want to affect me. I'm just going to chill, watch Netflix and pretend like it's not happening. The only people of our community who can do that, of our country, are those who have relative stability and comfort and protection. This is why Dr. King, in his letter to Birmingham jail, was so frustrated with the white moderate and white churches largely, because the status quo was comfortable for them. And so this social movement, the civil rights movement, wanted to disrupt that and expose how the world was not as perfect as we thought it was. And he was frustrated that so many people would choose the path of just comfort and waiting for it to go by. So I think in both of these paths, there is utility. We should take time to rest and turn off the world for a time. But if that's our fundamental response to the darkness we're in, there's dangers there. And on the other path, the path towards self-protection, we should take care of ourselves. But if we root ourselves in that instinct only, it can lead to some really dangerous things. There's one more path I want to highlight, and you could call this a path towards radicalization or extremist tendencies, but a different kind. So I want to highlight a passage of Dr. King's letter. This is MLK weekend, and this is what Dr. King says. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of justice or the extension of justice? In that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, men were crucified. We must never forget that all three were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. Two were extremists for immorality and thus fell below their environment. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love, truth, goodness, and thereby arose above his environment. The nation and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. Dr. King, taken from a letter from a Birmingham jail. What does it mean for us to respond to this moment? Not out of fear or self-protection only, but out of love. See, it is so natural to be scared in the dark. The question is, how do we respond? Do we revert back and hold on to our stuff and our tribe? Or do we practice healthy self-protection in a way that is equitable to others? Do we just bury our head in the sand? Or do we actually pay attention to what's being exposed in this moment so that others can experience peace and love and joy? And so in this reference, Dr. King describes being an extremist, a radical for love in the midst of the dangers of the darkness. What does it mean for us in this moment to continue to be formed by love, a radical love that challenges us to be sacrificial in our world on behalf of those in the margins, on behalf of our neighbors? This brings me back to 1 Corinthians 13. If you want to know what love looks like, I think practicing 1 Corinthians 13 in this moment might be a good starting point. How do we respond to our neighbors, to our family who are different from us, who see things differently? How do we walk the path of love and grace in a way that is both pastoral in its tenderness and care, but also prophetic in its voice that calls out and calls in injustice? So as I was chewing on this passage, and I don't have a lot more left, so I was chewing on this passage, I ended up rewriting it for almost like a paraphrase for this moment. And as I close, I'm going to invite you all to do this week. What does it mean to rewrite 1 Corinthians 13 for right now? We don't know, Inauguration Day is coming up, and we don't know what's going to happen. And whatever mirror we're going to see through dimly, whatever darkness and uncertainty will come, how do we continue to walk the path of love? I think I put this on the screen. I'll try to read it. And sorry, it's a little bit long. But the point here is, what does it mean to take the biblical concept of love in 1 Corinthians and then translate that into this moment? Knowing that people like Dr. King have challenged us to live radical love. This is Chris's paraphrase of 1 Corinthians 13. Love takes a breath before responding and is a non-anxious presence. Love smiles in empathy and joy at every face it sees. Love is not fueled by ego or insecurity, but finds its identity in God's love and nothing else. Love is burdened for others, especially those on the margins or who have been wronged by the world. Love's burden for others translates to social action. Love does not need to prove that it's right. Love does not need its own agenda to be accomplished. Love doesn't hold grudges and does not see people at their lowest moments. Love has boundaries when things or people are unhealthy, because loving and being tender to oneself is an intrinsic part of love's flow. Love is slow to believe conspiracy theories or emotionally manipulative narratives from on high or in secret, and is concerned about the hearts of those who have accepted false realities. Love puts in the work to find out what is true and real, and knows that what's true and real is often messy, complicated, and gray, and love is okay with that. Love isn't in a hurry. Love does not seek to harm others. I think you can go to the next slide. Love does not seek to harm others, ever. And even if others do not understand it, love avoids the temptation and the heresy of redemptive violence. Love never dominates or overpowers. Love takes pleasure in knowing and being known. Love bears all things, believes the best for all creation, hopes all things, and will outlast all things. Ultimately, love will win. On the other hand, political parties, tribal conflicts, and even nations will all fade into history. Even the most charismatic leaders will pass away like clouds passing by. Right now, it might seem like we don't know what's going on or that we can't see the whole picture, but there will come a time that we'll look back on this and see that God was there all along. In this moment, in this dark time, remember that our faith and hope is in God. In God is ultimately that God's forever love is here and will always be here. So Oak Life, I love you. Thank you for being a community of love. As I close, here are the kind of two challenges, if you will, responses of what it means to be people of faith in this moment. The first kind of invitation challenge, homework, or whatever you want to call it, is to meditate and pray on 1 Corinthians 13 and ask the question, what does love obligate me to this week? How can I be an extremist for love, just like Jesus? If you've got family members who have fallen into reactive, hate-filled rabbit holes, pray for them through this passage. Take care of yourself as well. Love yourself. Where might God meet you in this passage? And then the second, as you meditate and chew on this, is to write your own paraphrase. And I would love it if people would share this on their Facebook wall or wherever, like as an exercise. Take half an hour, read this passage, listen for what God might be saying to you, and then rewrite it for your own context. Before we transition to communion, I just want to thank you all for being with us in this time, this season that we're in. And even though there is uncertainty, there is darkness, there is fear, there is anxiety, God is with us. And God's presence will never leave us nor forsake us, even through this life. This is the hope of our faith. If you have communion elements, would you mind getting those ready? Whatever it might be in your household, the bread, the juice, coffee, whatever it have. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he was with his dear friends, and talk about a moment of darkness. It's actual nighttime, and there's so much spinning and going on in Jesus' world, and he shares a meal with them, and the meal reflects radical love. Jesus, on the night of his rest, took the bread, and after giving thanks, he broke it and gave it away to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup, which is a sign of a new covenant, a new way, a different way, different than our world's way. He said, "This is the cup of my way, shed for the forgiveness of sins. Whenever you drink of it, do this in remembrance of me." Now, Oak Life, may the radical love of God nourish us. May this bread and this cup be a reminder that God's love is bigger and more expansive than we can ever know, and it will be with us no matter what. And as we eat and drink, may we become nourished by it, and may we reflect that love to the world. Amen.
Amen.
I will offer a brief prayer to close this time out before we transition to a song that Greg is going to introduce us to. God, we pray for our world. Pray for peace. Pray for grace. Pray for protection. Pray for our community, Oak Life. All the beautiful images of you in our midst. Pray that we would all be able to sense your presence somehow, somewhere with us today. May we walk the path of love even through the darkest of times. Amen.
Thanks for that, Chris. Very much appreciated. Very beautiful. As you were mentioning the significance of MLK Week and the letter from a Birmingham jail. In the past, we did a study through that, which kind of resulted in me doing a poetry piece, writing a letter to MLK in response to his letter, which then led to a collaborative piece between First Pres of Hayward and Oak Life. And what we're going to see is a song by Michael Kim Eubanks that he wrote as kind of his reflection to my reflection to MLK's letter. As we listen to these words, the refrain's pretty simple. It's pretty repetitive for the sake of just grounding us in the moment needed to receive what God will give us in this time. So whatever that is for you, just take a moment to listen. And yeah.
So we say one day when the glory comes, it won't be yours, it won't be yours. One day when the war is won, we won't be sure, we won't be sure. Your glory, we wait on you, Jesus. We need your glory, we wait on you, Jesus. We need your glory, we wait on you, Jesus. We need your glory. So we say one day when the glory comes, it won't be ours, it won't be ours. One day when the war is won, we won't be sure, we won't be sure. So we call on you, Jesus. We need your glory. We call on you, Jesus. We need your glory. We wait on you. We wait on you, Jesus. We need your glory. We wait on you, Jesus. We need your glory.
Dear Dr. King, this letter, written to you, a man who could never read it, you who gave your life to a cause still relevant today, but experienced it in ways I could never perceive. With every letter you wrote, your words painted structure strong enough to support the impossible weight of hate and bigotry, carrying your message into the echoes of eternity, finding refuge in the heart of this young man, a simple admirer. One who aspires to grab our society's low bar with both hands and raise it higher, building the body of he who sent me and, interestingly enough, sent you. Someone who looked the titans of your time directly in the eye and said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, from a prison cell in the very pit of tribulation, up against an omnidirectional hydra of oppression. You demonstrated a superpower greater than the Avengers or X-Men combined. You held fast to God's promise within the darkness and allowed him to shine, transforming light into ink, which you would use to transcribe a call to action, declaring that for those facing injustice, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed, and done so openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty. I never read a letter with such compassion, intelligence, tact, displaying the heart of righteous rebellion through a nonviolent act. Your vigor was expressed so eloquently. Following the first followers of Christ, transcending time via letter, you mastered this craft. reaching immortality the same way. So I pray the heart of this letter finds you as an offering of thanks and falls upon ears of those who would listen, landing in the heart of a people willing to learn, love, fight, and follow the way you did and beyond. Thank you, Dr. King. Oak Life, yeah. Time to love big, y'all. Time to love big. So with that, we will close this service. Thank you for everyone who's participated. You know who you are. You're on the screen. You're beautiful people. I love the dog. Is that a new dog? Sam? What is that?
No, it's Willow.
Oh, well, I didn't see. Well, anyway, you know what? I got distracted. My apologies. Will you please?
Beth's cat is on the screen too. What was the name, Beth?
Moritz.
It's a good name.
Moritz.
Now I got to go get my cat, Indy. We got to have a cat party, animal party. I got to go get my Willow now. Anyway, as we close, Leslie, would you do us the honor of closing the service by reading our benediction this morning?
Absolutely. And I hope everyone is joining in with me. All right. So, God of love, as we walk in uncertain times, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. In the midst of the darkness of our world, may we walk in the light of your love, and may our lives reflect your light. Be with us now as we go forth to love and serve the world, in person or from a distance. Amen.
Amen. Be well, Oak Life. We love you. Peace out. High fives. High fives all the way around. All the way around.
I nailed